So what happens when our best medicines are supposed to be working, but a deadly infection just keeps fighting back? Today, we're going to dive into the incredibly sneaky survival tactics of a super fungus. You know, it's one of the most frustrating puzzles in all of medicine. You've got a sick patient, the lab has identified the bad guy, and the tests say loud and clear that a specific drug should wipe it out. But it doesn't. The infection just rages on. So the huge question is, what if the enemy is playing a different game than we thought?
Well, the answer is hiding out in the microscopic world of fungi. We tend to think of mushrooms, things you eat. But some of their cousins are really opportunistic killers, just waiting for our body's defenses to drop. And one of them, in particular, has become a true master of survival.
Let's meet Candida. Now, this is a type of yeast that, believe it or not, lives harmlessly on and inside most of us, most of the time. But if our body's natural balance gets thrown off, this quiet little resident can suddenly turn into a really dangerous pathogen, causing infections that can be anything from a minor nuisance to something truly life-threatening.
For decades, the main culprit, accounting for about 60% of these infections, was a species called Candida albicans. But the game is changing. Other species are popping up more and more, and one of them, Candida tropicalis, is quickly becoming a huge cause for concern.
All right, let's start with who this fungus really likes to target and why it's becoming such a growing threat inside our healthcare systems.
So, who is most at risk? Well, Candida tropicalis absolutely thrives when our defenses are at their lowest. It targets the most critically ill patients in the ICU, pregnant women whose bodies are going through massive changes, and really anyone with medical devices like catheters. You got to think of those devices as superhighways for the infection to get inside the body. And on top of all that, if you're on long-term antibiotics, they can wipe out your good bacteria, basically rolling out the red carpet for this fungus.
But the danger isn't just about who gets infected. It's about our ability to actually fight back. And that brings us to a massive challenge, the problem of drug resistance. And look, we are not talking about a minor problem here. In one study of ICU patients who got infected with Candida tropicalis, the mortality rate was a staggering 31.5%. Think about that. Nearly 1 out of every 3 patients did not survive. And get this, over 93% of those sane patients had some kind of medical device, like a catheter. It just goes to show how these common, often life-saving procedures can accidentally open the door for a really deadly infection.
Now here is the real kicker. In that same study, almost 89% of the fungal samples they took were resistant to fluconazole. That is one of our most common frontline go-to antifungal drugs. It's like sending in the firefighters only to find out their hoses are spraying gasoline.
So based on that, you'd think this is a pretty straightforward case of drug resistance, right? Well, not exactly. This is where the story gets a whole lot weirder, and it creates a huge dilemma for doctors.
This is really the heart of the mystery. You've got a situation where the fungus is clearly winning inside the patient's body, but the report from the lab is telling a completely different story. And that raises this terrifying question: what if the very tests we rely on are missing something huge?
And here's that frustrating puzzle in action. On one side, you have the lab result. It comes back stamped susceptible. That means the drug is supposed to work. But on the other side, in the real world, in the hospital bed, the patient just isn't getting any better. The infection persists. You can imagine how maddening that is for everyone involved.
So what's really going on? The answer is this fascinating and frankly dangerous survival mechanism. It's a way for the fungus to hide from our drugs right out in the open. It's a phenomenon called trailing growth. Now, this is the crucial part. It's not the same as resistance. It's a form of tolerance. Imagine a massive attack wipes out 99% of an enemy army. That's what a drug usually does. But with trailing growth, there's this small, tough-as-nails group of survivors that just keeps going. They hunker down and continue to grow slowly, even while they're being bombarded by a drug that should have killed them. And you can literally see it happening right here. These are lab dishes with an antifungal drug in them. That big clear ring you see, that's the kill zone. The fungus shouldn't be able to grow there. But look closer. You see those tiny little dots, those specks inside the zone? Those are the tolerant survivors, stubbornly growing right in the middle of a drug dose that's lethal to all their friends.
So, if this is happening, why on earth don't our standard lab tests pick up on it? Well, it's because this fungus is a true master of disguise. This tolerance ability, it turns out, is incredibly unstable, and it only shows its face under very specific conditions. Check this out. The whole trailing ability is completely dependent on pH. It only shows up in a neutral pH range, which just so happens to be pretty similar to the pH inside the human body. But if you make the lab environment just a little too acidic or a little too alkaline, poof, the trait just vanishes. So the test can easily miss it if the conditions aren't perfect.
And if that wasn't tricky enough, the ability is also incredibly fleeting. This chart shows that after just a few months in lab storage, a lot of these fungal strains just lose their trailing ability. Even something as simple as freezing and thawing a sample can make this amazing survival trait disappear. It's a true, now you see it, now you don't defense.
So, how in the world do you fight an enemy that can turn its best defense on and off at will? To unmask this foe, scientists realized they needed a much better test, one that was specifically designed to spot this hidden threat.
And that test is called Population Analysis Profiling, or PAP. Think of it like this. A standard test is like a simple yes or no question, but a PAP assay is more like a detailed investigation. It uses a huge number of cells and tests them against a whole range of drug concentrations. It's basically like using a high-powered magnifying glass to find that tiny, hidden group of survivors.
And this is what the results look like. For a normal, susceptible fungus, that blue line on the graph would just plummet straight down. But with an isolate that has this trailing ability, you see that long tail stretching way out to the right. That tail is the tolerant subpopulation, surviving and growing at drug levels that should be completely lethal. This right here is the smoking gun that our standard tests just completely miss.
And this all brings us to the most important point. The microbial world, it's not a simple binary. It's not just resistant or susceptible. There's this third, shadowy category of tolerance that lets these deadly infections hang on. And if we're going to win this fight, we absolutely need the tools to see it, to understand it, and ultimately to defeat it. So this leaves us with a final and pretty sobering question. This whole trailing growth thing is just one sneaky trick from one type of fungus. In this constant chess match between modern medicine and microbes, you have to wonder, how many more brilliant survival strategies are out there, hiding in plain sight, just waiting to be discovered?